All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. My name is Rachel, and I am part of the customer success team here at ActivePipe. And today we're going to be covering deliverability and just best practices on how to maximize your inbox delivery. So I do want to make sure you'll see me. I have some notes here, so I want to make sure I'm scrolling both through my notes and also making sure that I'm going to the right slide. But today we're going to spend most of our time really in a slide deck, which is not usual for most of our this month in ActivePipe. Usually we are in the platform, but because most of this information is fairly straightforward, we will be going off of a deck today. So what we'll be covering today, there are three main things that we're going to address today to help really unpack what deliverability actually means. So first, we'll make sure that we define what is deliverability so that we're all on the same page about that. And the next, we'll highlight the key factors that actually impact your deliverability. And then finally, we'll share some best practices to ensure that you land in the inbox as often as possible for your recipients. And then I will try and monitor the Q&A or the chat along the way. However, forgive me if I don't see your question. So we may just hold that till the end, but I will make sure to save time at the end for some Q&A. So make sure you just add those to the chat, please. All right. So what is deliverability? Oops. So I think the first thing that needs to really be distinguished between is what is and what is not deliverability. So let's specify a little bit further because there actually is in fact a difference between email delivery and email deliverability. So email delivery is when an email can make it into any folder. So it's really a simple yes or no kind of question. Was the email that you sent delivered to your recipient? And can that recipient accept this message? So if yes, then that means that the email has gone forward into whatever folder it may be within their email delivery system. If no, then that means that there could be something else going on. So some examples of when your emails may not have been delivered are, for example, it could be an invalid email address. So an ActivePipe actually will let you know if an email is invalid. It will show up next to that contact record and will let you know that they have an invalid email address. Another reason could be maybe the message or the email that you're trying to send is too large to be sent. So it could be something that is, high in megabytes, which isn't very typical for most email providers anymore, but it could be a case. It also could be the contact's inbox is full. So maybe they haven't cleaned out their emails. Again, this is not so much a case anymore, but it could potentially be one if someone has maybe never deleted any of their emails. It also could be an email domain could be invalid, which is similar to having an invalid email address. However, the idea to focus on here is, did that message end up in your contact's receiving end? And if yes, then that means it was delivered. So simple yes or no, was your email able to be received by your contact? So next, that brings us to deliverability, which is, so once that email is delivered to the recipient, where does the message actually land? So what we're talking about is inbox placement, where it ultimately lands once it gets to that recipient. So more specifically, we're asking which folder did the email end up in? So whether, for example, that could be their primary one, their primary inbox. It could be a spam folder, or if you use Gmail, it could even be, you might even see now you have several folders of all sorts, which are like social tabs or your promotions tabs, things like that. And so the goal, our number one goal is we want to land in that contact's actual inbox. So the question for today is on deliverability. And that's going to be our key focus is how can we have our emails delivered to a person's actual inbox? And so I'm just taking a look at the chat real quick. Someone asked, how can you tell if an email has been delivered to an inbox and not spam? It's really not, it's not the easiest it's not going to tell you, point blank that your email was delivered to spam. However, we'll get into some elements of you can check some of your reporting and kind of deduce if based on deliverability and what those view rates look like, you can kind of start to deduce if your emails are potentially going to someone's spam based on what those view and even like click rates look like in your reporting. So we'll dig into that a little bit more later on in today's presentation. Okay. All right. So there's one other definition or term that's important to talk about before we go further into deliverability. And that's we're going to talk about this because this is something that actually does impact your deliverability. And that's your sending reputation. So your sending reputation, it's an actual literal score. So it's a score from 0 to 100 that's assigned by internet service providers, or you might be familiar with ISPs. So these ISPs will actually monitor your sending reputation, your sending activity, and then any bad behaviors will make your score go down, and any good sending behaviors will make your score go up. So kind of think of this like a credit score for your emails. The higher your sending reputation score, the higher the likelihood that you will end up in your recipient's actual inbox. And the lower your sending reputation score, the more likely it is that you'll end up in places like their spam. And we'll talk about ways that you can check this score and improve your sending reputation in a little bit. But again, your sending reputation basically is a score from 0 to 100 that's assigned to you, and that's going to impact your deliverability. And also on the screen, you can see these are just some examples of some service providers. So what impacts deliverability? So now that we've established what our definitions and terms are, let's look at how that actually translates in ActivePipe and what impacts deliverability for you. The first is what we're going to be talking about on this slide is the first would be your domains. Let's talk about your domain sending reputation. So your sending domain is what comes after the @ symbol in your email address. So for instance, mine would be @activepipe.com. And so for many of you, this will be your website address. Or for some of you, you might be using what's called a subdomain as well, which would look like an example of that would be activepipe.yourwebsite.com. And that's depending on how your account is set up. But for most of you, it's going to be the @ and then your website address. Either way, it's important to note here, an important thing to remember is that whoever shares that domain with you, so which in many cases will be all of the agents at your office. So what I'm saying here is that most agents who are under one office, you actually share a domain together. So that means that you share the responsibility then of maintaining your sending reputation. So it's important to work as a team to keep your domain sending reputation healthy. And a positive sending reputation will mean a higher chance of landing in that inbox. And we'll talk about some tips for improving your sending reputation in a little bit. But again, the important thing to keep in mind here is that you are sharing your sending reputation with everyone that's on your domain. Okay, the second major part of this is based on how your recipients are engaging with your email. So the first part, your sending domain, we have a little bit of control over this. We can, there are best practices to maintain that sending reputation. The second part that we're talking about now, your recipient's behavior, we have a little less control over that, but I think it's still important to acknowledge this since it does impact your overall deliverability. So for example, if a contact deletes your messages without opening them, smart filters, especially in Gmail, will start to notice this behavior. And that's when they'll actually start to flag this and that will send a trigger to them. And that will have your messages start landing in other folders like spam or in Gmail, like we mentioned, the promotions tab. So things like, again, behaviors like your contacts not opening your emails. The other consideration is that if contacts start flagging your emails as spam, that the more likely your emails will start, this will impact them then landing in spam for other people's accounts as well. So a few recipients marking your email as spam can affect your overall deliverability. And one thing I always try and reframe when I'm talking to customers is really their mindset around unsubscribers. So think of your unsubscribers in some way as really more of a positive thing, because it's better to have someone unsubscribe from your email versus having them mark it as spam. Because again, the more people who are marking your emails as spam, that will impact then your other recipients who you're trying to send this email to, who maybe it could be relevant information and they want to receive those emails. That may impact them receiving the email too and may have it go to their spam. So again, think of unsubscribes as a good thing and a way of really helping you clean your database to really narrow it down to a list of actively engaged contacts. And so lastly, it's worth asking yourself, am I sending the right message to the right group of people? So if you're consistently sending all of your emails to all of your contacts, you're probably not sending the most relevant materials all the time. For instance, your buyers might not be interested in, your market reports, or your past clients might not be interested in, newly listed properties. So those are things that might not be relevant to them, and it might provoke them to unsubscribe if that's, messaging that's not really relevant to them. So you want to be sure, that leads me to us saying, you want to be sure that you're segmenting your contacts so that you can provide the most pertinent message to the people who need it. And overall, if a contact unsubscribes, that is way better than them marking it as spam. So I always just like to bring that out, to take that with a grain of salt and try and reframe your mindset around who your unsubscribers are. Okay, just keeping an eye on the chat, and we're moving right along. All right. And so for the last piece of really what impacts deliverability, we have that the one that this is something that you're in the most control over. And that would be the content included in your emails, i.e. the subject lines and the content that is actually in your emails. So we have a few tips for you on this one. Number one, things to avoid are those spammy words. So there are certain words that are flagged for spam automatically. So your providers can pick up on certain words. And this is really more so around your subject lines. They can pick up on those words. And if they see those words, they automatically may flag that as, something that could potentially be spam. And some examples of these words could be words like free or urgent, opportunity, or price can even be one, which price can be a tricky one, especially if we're talking about subject lines. Most of the time I see people, including a dollar amount. But these are, again, triggers for email providers that signal an email might be spam. So this is really, these kinds of words are really, I would, maybe recommend staying away from them when it comes to your subject lines in your emails. But these are just a few examples. You can also do a friendly Google search, and you can always find out a lot more to maybe avoid in your subject lines. But to be clear, this is in the subject line, and this is really more so of a bigger red flag when it comes to that subject line, and less so in the body of your email. And these words can trigger to your ISP to mark as spam or land you just in a different inbox altogether. Okay, and someone asked a question about photos, including them and being flagged. You're one step ahead of me. So we are just getting to that. So the second piece of a best practice to keep in mind is try and keep some text included in your emails. So what I'm saying is emails that are 100% images are far more likely to be tagged as spam versus emails that have both image and text in them. So this is why we always encourage you to, type out some sort of personalized message at the top of your, for instance, your newsletters. Adding some sort of personalization, and it doesn't have to be a long paragraph. It can really just be like a line or two. Really helps with your deliverability overall as well. And even having something like a heading in between a featured listing, as well as other new listings that are on the market. Having that headline and just some sort of text to break up the images that are in your emails will really go a long way. So we highly recommend to avoid 100% image only in your emails. Yes, and this is again, this is a great opportunity to personalize your emails and to prevent you from going to spam. And it's a really good way to engage with your contacts in ActivePipe. And we'll talk about ways, easy ways to personalize your emails too in some upcoming slides. Some other things to consider are be sure when you're building out those newsletters that you're linking to reputable sites. So I always say your local newspapers and magazines are great places to start. And 95% of the time, those are totally safe and reputable, sites to be grabbing information from. What you want to try to avoid is finding and linking an article from some random site that you haven't really ensured that is the best site or the most legit site. So just be cautious of where your links are going to in your emails, and make sure that they're coming from more reputable sites. This is probably just a general rule of thumb beyond deliverability, but good for building up your brand too, because people are going to be clicking on those links. The next piece of advice, don't use, and this might be something that's kind of common sense, but try not to use excessive capitalization or punctuation in your emails. So that might be a simple and common mistakes I've seen, but if you're using an exclamation mark, maybe try to limit that to 1 versus 3, especially in your subject lines. Punctuation can be kind of another trigger for spam. So maybe limiting that. And then words in all caps are also likely to be flagged as potential spam as well. So it's fine probably in, again, I would try and avoid maybe using all caps in your subject lines. When it comes to the bodies of your email and like the actual content in your emails, I think it's okay to have, one word that you capitalize, but try and avoid doing a whole sentence in all caps, and especially in that subject line. And then lastly, and this is something that we take care of for you, but it's definitely worth knowing. In all of your email templates, you have you have to have a physical mailing address and an unsubscribe link at the bottom of your emails. And this is really more of a compliance rule to, again, not end up in spam. But ActiveType takes care of this for you on your templates. You always have your under your contact us, some sort of physical address, and then below that, an option to manage their preferences and unsubscribe from your emails. All right, then. So those are some aspects of that impact your deliverability. Now let's talk a little bit more about some best practices that you can adopt to maximize your inbox deliverability. So getting to your recipient's inbox. So the first thing that is very important and that we kind of alluded to earlier is to segment your lists. And you've come to these, if you've come to these webinars before, you've heard it from us a million times. The key to good email marketing is sending the right message to the right person at the right time. And all of that hinges on having your contacts segmented into relevant groups. So being able to choose to send to groups like, say, your potential buyers versus your potential sellers versus your current buyers, and et cetera, will ensure that you're sending relevant information to those relevant people. And as much as we can, we want to avoid sending to all contacts. Really, the only use case for sending an email to all of your contacts in your database is likely going to be your newsletter. But other than that, you want to target your message to specific audiences. So that means if you're using a CRM and have it integrated with ActivePipe, that you need to use your organizing features in your CRM and then those groups will sync over into ActivePipe. So some of those examples for across different CRMs that I've seen for ways to group your contacts, they might be called stages or keywords or groups or even topics. Those are ones that I've seen, but all of those sync into ActivePipe as tags. And you can make use of those when sending relevant messaging. Or if you don't use a CRM and you're uploading your contacts into ActivePipe via CSV file, then you should be using our tagging system to split out to your groups. And I would, I want to just remind you too, you don't have to really overcomplicate it. Just having even, 4 separate tag groups is really going to help you out in the long run and really going to take you a long way with sending relevant messaging to your respective recipients. So, the common tags or groupings that I've seen that I think are really beneficial are, segmenting out your buyers from your sellers and also segmenting out your past clients. And then also another highly effective one and used one is your primary sphere. So, don't feel like you have to have 20 different tags or groups. A good place to start is really maybe just with those 4 that I mentioned. And we're not going to dive into tagging today, but we do have lots of resources in our knowledge base on tagging. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you do have questions about how to tag in ActivePipe. And I will also share our support link to our knowledge base towards the end of this webinar. But again, I will remind you that unsubscribes are a form of tagging as well. And this is a way of cleaning up your database. So I will try and get off my high horse now about unsubscribes. All right. Another tip to consider is personalizing your messages. So make use of, if you have been in our Active Play platform before, we have something called placeholders. So make use of our placeholders so that you're tailoring your message specifically to your contacts. So not only does this help make your message look a little bit more personalized and really separates you from, some of the other agents out there, but it also is less spammy to those service providers that are screening your emails and looking for this. If they see some element of personalization, such as using the contact's first name, it's less likely to be triggered to those ISPs and for them to move that over into another folder. And it's also a great way to catch your contact's attention. Everyone loves receiving, messaging that they feel is tailored to them. So if they see their name, they are far more inclined to read the rest of your message. This one also loops back around to segmenting your contacts because personalizing the content is also really important. So the more that you can, send relevant content to those people who you are interacting with, such as, sending your Fort Worth clients information that is about Fort Worth, or sending your Dallas clients, articles and listings that are relevant to their area and where they live. Information like that is always better to have personalized. So first things first, and most important, is that you need to tag your groups out separately to group those out. But then, taking a step further and creating great local content for your separate recipients' needs, that is an even stronger move for getting your recipients and your contacts to read the rest of your message. Okay. And if you've, as we've shown before in many of our past webinars, the amount of data you get back from your emails is huge as well. So keep an eye on this. Check in on your campaign reports. You do have the ability to view reporting on any campaigns that you're sending and see what's getting, solid open rates and click rates. That's again, a great way to gauge, if what your deliverability looks like and if those emails are potentially going to their actual inbox by them opening it, or if it could be going to another one of those other inboxes, such as the spam or promotions. So make sure you keep an eye on these reports and take notice of which campaigns are getting, solid open and click rates, and even the ones that maybe are getting those lower open or click rates. Then use that to your advantage. So keep up with your top performing campaigns and keep going the way that you are, and maybe consider tweaking those campaigns that are lower performing, trying to replicate what some of those elements are in your top performing campaigns to try and give them a boost. So the more opens and clicks that you get, the more likely your emails are to end up in inboxes versus the flip side. So again, this is really going to boost that sending reputation that we talked about earlier. And if your open and click rates are always super low, then that's something that you want to consider as well, that it could be potentially going to people's spam box. And just to give you some perspective, and this is across all of our US active pipe clients right now, what we see is the average open rate across our US active pipe clients is about 18% for the open rate, and the average click-through rate or interaction rate, as it also might be called, is about 11% for among active pipe US client users. And I think in the real estate industry as a whole, open rates, we tend to see closer to 10%. And it even drops off a little bit further for your click or interaction rates to about 2%. But one thing, I always say if your open rates are, above, I think like 10%, that's, I think, usually a good indication. And if they're below 10%, that's when, things can get a little dicey. So you may want to start looking at ways that maybe you can tweak those emails that you're sending out. So anything below that 10, really the 10%, I would really say for an open rate is kind of the minimum benchmark that I would try and follow. Okay, last few pieces of advice I'll give you are do not purchase lists. This is really a big no-no that we've seen happen over some time. And buying lists are really getting more and more dangerous for your sending reputation. It can be extremely harmful. We've actually, seen some lists that actually have spam traps in them now. So for example, in these lists that people are purchasing, there may be email addresses like spam@spamcompliance.com and things like that are included in these lists that automatically trigger to these ISPs and send those recipients or those contacts on that list straight to spam folders for your recipients. So my advice, really just don't do that. And, remember, if have a conscience and really remember that deliverability is a collective experience, meaning that if you buy lists and are these suddenly impact your sending reputation, you're really impacting the sending reputation and the domain of the other agents in your office as well. And also, I mean, above anything else, that if you do have other contacts who are not from purchase lists, who are actually your contacts, and you start to affect the sending reputation, that can actually impact those clients who actually do want to receive those emails from receiving them and it going to potentially their spam folders as well. So please don't purchase lists. Another similar tactic to purchasing lists is harvesting lists from social sites. So I would avoid this as well. We really want to be sure that the contacts in your database are there because at some point they said, yes, sign me up to receiving your emails. And purchased or harvested lists simply do not fall into that category. They have not opted in to receiving emails from you. And then the last thing that you can do that might be helpful for sending or for checking your sending reputation, there are actually websites and services like SenderScore that will tell you what your sending reputation of your domain looks like. And SenderScore is just one example. I know that there are many others out there, and many of them are free to use. So you can always, I think SenderScores is just senderscore.com. But you can also always give it a little Google and see what other reputable sites there are out there to be checking your sending reputation. All right, moving right along. And then lastly, ActivePipe also has its own service that is geared towards helping you protect your sending reputation. And that's called Smart Send. So Smart Send, this is a feature that it has to be requested to be turned on. And you'll see if you do have Smart Send turned on, it's something that can be enabled. But this can track the engagement on what it does is it tracks engagement on your previous emails. And any contacts that you have that have not opened your email, the last 3 of your emails, these people will be marked as disengaged and will be they will not receive your emails for the next 60 days. So we're not unsubscribing these. If you have Smart Send turned on, these contacts are not being unsubscribed from your database. They're simply being marked as disengaged. And then that means that they will not receive communications from you for the next 60 days. And then after that 60 days, they'll be moved back into, they'll be marked as engaged, or they'll be marked just as a normal contact, and you can start sending to them again. But then the cycle can always repeat itself where, again, if those contacts don't open the next 3 of your emails, they will get moved to that disengaged list again. Let's see. So a couple of things, really benefits to this Smart Send 2 is this is a great way to help you, clean up your contact list and really to clean up your database as well, and really pinpoint out who are those people. I mean, I think lots of people on this call probably have like thousands of contacts. Who are those people who actually are engaging with your emails and want to be receiving them and are good people to be following up with even outside of emails too? So this is a great way to help you really clean your database, and also helps with protecting and building back up that sending reputation that we've talked about earlier on. But if this is something, I will say again, this is something that everyone has access to. It is not an automatically enabled for you, but if it's something that you're interested in, you can always reach out to our support team about this, and we can explore that for you. One other thing to keep in mind too is that our active pipe team we actually keep an eye on your domain health and sending reputation as well. And if we notice if we start to notice some very low like view rates and interaction rates, we may reach out to your office and just recommend turning on Smart Send. So that's something, again, you can either have turned on your own, or we may be monitoring it as well and advise that to our contact at your brokerage. But that concludes today's presentation. I hope you guys all found it helpful. I am going to take a look at our chat. So someone asked, where do you find Smart Send? So that is a great question. You'll notice it when you go to schedule a campaign, and when you go to choose your recipients, you'll notice something that says that Smart Send is enabled. So you'll see that again in the campaigns tab, and when you go to schedule a campaign and you go to select your contacts who you're sending it to, you'll see Smart Send is enabled. And it does not have to be set up for each contact. It's something on our end. It will only apply, the Smart Send will only apply to contacts, again, who have not opened the last 3 of your emails. So anyone who's been opening your emails, this will not impact them. They will still continue to receive your emails. But again, anyone who has not been interacting with those last 3 consecutive emails will be marked as disengaged and will not receive emails for 60 days. Great question. How do we get our send score? I think it was called sendscore.com, sender score. So if you check out this, if you just do a Google search of sender score, I think it's called senderscore.com. That's a service that can, where you can find out what your sending reputation score is. But that's just the one that we looked up. You can also do a little bit of research maybe on maybe just doing a Google of sending reputation services. Okay. And while we wait to see if we have any other questions, I'm just going to put our support. So I just put in the chat, support.activepipe.com. That is where you can go to access our knowledge base. So again, if you have questions really about anything regarding that has to do with ActivePipe, again, if it's, ways to tag contacts in ActivePipe or questions about deliverability, you can go to that site. And I definitely highly recommend bookmarking that too in your browser, because it really has helpful articles and even videos on how to do just about everything in ActivePipe. And then I'll also include our support team's email address too, that you can always reach out to if you have questions, whether it be about SmartSend or anything that we've covered today. Reach out to our support team and they can always advise you, as well as this is being recorded, this session, so that will be shared on our website on activepipe.com under the webinars tab towards the end of the month. But if this is something that you want to rewatch, later on today or even sooner, or forward to any of your other colleagues, you can always reach out to our support team and we can send you this recording. Someone asked, I actually don't know the answer to that question. If you have to include your IP address on sender score, that would probably be something to ask them, or whichever, sending reputation service you're looking into. That would probably be a question to them. Also might be worth Googling. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions in here. But again, I hope that everyone found the information covered today very helpful. Once again, this is being recorded, so this will be available on our website later on in the month. And if you'd like to watch this recording again, sooner than that, feel free to reach out to support@activepipe.com. And otherwise, we will see you on this month in ActivePipe. I hope everyone has a great day. And going into next week, I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving week.